Hey girls and gals, welcome back to my channel. My name is Taylor and today's video is going to be my winterween reading vlog. I'm very excited for this readathon. It is definitely like a very fun way to start off the reading year with a bunch of spooky reads. I did post a TBR video of just all of my January reads as well as my winterween reads. So for the most part, what I plan on reading this week was explained in that video, but just to gloss over it quickly, The Stepford Wives by Levin. This is kind of like a very traditional classic horror that I wanted to fit in there, and then the other two are kind of like horror fantasy. So Monstrous Volume 6, looking forward to reading this one. And then I also have Mort by Olivie. All of these are very short, very festive. All of them kind of fit that winterween vibe. And I do have most of these fit most of the prompts. However, I know I was talking about in my last video how I was struggling with read a book with snow on the cover. I did find a book. I'm gonna insert it here because I'm listening to it via audiobook. That's gonna be Misery by Stephen King, and that's the only book that I've really started for this readathon. And it's funny because on Libby, which is where I'm listening to it, the cover is different than the one that I'm going to show. It's actually very simplistic. It's just red and then says like the title and the author's name, but most of the covers, Stephen King books just have a lot of covers, especially the older ones. They've been reprinted over and over again. So there are actually multiple covers of this one that have snow on the cover. So I'm gonna be using that one. I'm enjoying it so far. I actually tried reading this one as an ebook and switched to audiobook, and I think that's a really good decision. I'm really enjoying this one on audiobook more than I was reading it physically. And this one I feel like is a very iconic Stephen King work, so I don't have to talk about it too much in depth, at least in terms of the synopsis. But this is about a writer who gets in a car crash and wakes up in the home of his #1 fan. This #1 fan is super thrilled that she's managed to save her very favorite writer, and she has big plans for him, not just in terms of saving his life, but she did not like the way that his most iconic series ended. So she is going to hold him captive until he writes a better ending to her favorite character's story. So I am enjoying this one so far. I actually haven't seen the movie adaptation, so that might be something fun to do later on this week. I know this one is a particularly loved Stephen King book, even like the adaptation with Kathy Bates, both the book and the movie I hear great things about. I'm enjoying it. I'm about 30% of the way through it. It definitely was a bit of a rocky start for me because I wasn't expecting the action to start so suddenly. Just from hearing the synopsis, the pacing is a little bit different than what I anticipated it to be. But once I've gotten into it, and again, once I switched over to the audiobook, I feel like I'm enjoying the reading experience a whole lot more. So that is definitely going to be the book that I use for read a book with snow on the cover. I think it takes place late February, early March, so I could potentially use that for read a book with a winter setting as well. I'll have to look up when the first day of spring is, but there's a lot of snow in this story, and it does kind of have a lot to do with the story at times, so that could count for a winter setting. So definitely for both of those, that is going to be my very first read of this readathon. It is the longest book, I think. I don't have a physical copy, but the rest of these are fairly short. I can't remember the audiobook length for Misery, but I think it's the longest, so I'm definitely not going to finish it until later on in this week. And tonight, I don't think I'm gonna pick up the audiobook. I think I'm going to save the audiobook for when I'm driving to and from work, but I think tonight I'm going to pick up a physical book because I haven't actually picked up a physical book yet this year. It's only January 4th, but I haven't picked up a physical book. I am very excited to dive into my reading goals and read something physically. So I'm gonna go with Mort by Olivie. I just absolutely loved the Atlas 6 last year, and I have a feeling this one is very short, so I'm going to be using it for the read a novella one. I can also use this for read a book at night because it is nighttime right now. So I feel like I maybe could get this done in one sitting. We'll have to see, but definitely I'm gonna go ahead and start this tonight. And I'm just very excited to kick off winterween. So let's get to reading. it is now Thursday, and I've had a very, very different sort of reading experience than I was thinking. Now, the books have been the same as the ones that I said I was going to read. My TBR has been very consistent in that regard. Just the order in which I read them and the way that I feel about them definitely switched up a little bit. I haven't been updating too much, but I have been doing a lot of reading, so I have completed quite a few books, which is exciting. The first book that I'm going to talk about is the one with snow on the cover. That's going to be Misery by Stephen King, which I was very surprised that this was the book that I finished first. It's actually the first book that I finished in 2022, which I'm kind of bummed about it because I did not love this one so much. What Misery did have going for it, I thought it was definitely one of King's like better paced books. I do love his really huge character driven books that have so much information that's not like relevant to the plot. Really love those. I just really love a good character driven story, but definitely I feel like this one was a lot shorter, but definitely very concise. It felt like a thriller. It didn't have a lot of filler in it, and I thought the ending was pretty decent for a Stephen King book as well. This I thought was paced very well. It started fast, kept going, and I also had a really enjoyable time reading it for the most part. When I started it, I managed to finish it a lot faster than I thought I would, just because there was so much tension and suspense in the situation in which our main character is in. I kind of knew the basics of it, but I had just never really seen the movie, read the book yet, so knew the basics, none of the details, and I am very interested in watching the movie. And then also, I think season 2 of Castle Rock has some iteration of Annie Wilkes in it. So I would be really interested in checking that out as well, because I did love the first season. I never watched the second season, primarily because I hadn't read Misery, also because I watched the first episode and it was kind of triggering for me at the time and my mental health. So reading this book, I kind of definitely see where that is coming from, and unfortunately that leads me to like the parts about this book that I did not like. The biggest one being the way that mental health is treated in this book. And I don't want to like make excuses for King or try and put words in his mouth, because I know he does a lot of research into certain things before putting it into his books. Like he will do research on different professions and different like areas of scientific study to make sure that it's accurate in his books. Leads to a lot of info dumps in his books, I think too. But he does do a lot of research, and I think with the research and the opinions that were being held during the time about mental health, I think really influenced this one. But just the way that bipolar was talked about, and then mental health in general, but especially bipolar, was frankly awful, very triggering for me, and just like not good. I feel like if you've ever had any sort of mental illness, if you're like close or have any sort of personal connection to any sort of like mood disorder, it was really hard to read. There were several comments that were made throughout it, like in just like a narrative tone, that just very dehumanizing to read. And I hated that. And I hated the fact that it was a really good book for me other than those parts, but those parts really impacted me so much. So I just feel like if you have ever dealt with any sort of mental illness, maybe look up some quotes, maybe look up some trigger warnings before you go into this one, because it just was not handled well at all. And again, may or may not be a product of its time, but even if it is a product of its time, definitely something you want to know before diving into it. Yeah, the mental health rep in this was terrible, and really ruined what would be a good reading experience, I feel like, because I thought it was a good story, and it just definitely didn't need like all of the out of hand comments about people with depression and other mental illnesses. So yes, not the greatest starts to my readathon or to my yearly reading. But I will say, now that I have finished Misery, I would be really interested in checking out the movie and then checking out the Castle Rock adaptation, because both of those are newer. Well, I don't know how soon the movie came out after the book, but the TV show is definitely a lot more recent. And while there's still like lots and lots of problems with how mental health is depicted in the thriller horror genres, I think it is a big continuing discussion, but I would argue that it's a lot better than the 80s or whenever Misery was written. So I would be interested to checking out for sure Castle Rock to see if maybe the depiction is a little bit better. So yeah, kind of a bummer. Definitely I would say it's not in my bottom 5 Stephen King. It's like lower middle of the pack. I know Misery is very hyped, probably I think honestly a lot because of the movie and Kathy Bates, but yeah, just not for me. But moving on to the next book that I actually finished, which I was surprised by and luckily loved this one a whole lot more. That would be The Stepford Wives by Levin. This one also very short. I ended up reading this one in a single sitting last night. I could not put it down because this one highly recommend. Not a single word is wasted in this book. It is not even 200 pages. It's 145 pages and not a single word is wasted. Not a single scene is superfluous. This is so eerie. Again, a bit of an older read. This one came out in 1972. However, I thought this one actually holds up a lot more than Misery. It is, you can tell it was written in 1972, but again, like Rosemary's Baby, I just feel like even though there are some things that you can tell it wasn't written like this year, this holds up. Very horrifying, very eerie. This one's definitely very interesting because from pretty much the get-go, you feel like something wrong is happening, and the slow growing sense of dread in this one was immaculate. Definitely very creepy. I feel like even though, again, you know, 70s culture, early 70s culture, a lot different than today's culture. I just feel like on a very basic level, this is still like a story and like a narrative that really hits deep, would hit deep for a lot of people, me included. I was horrified while I was reading it, and I really enjoyed it. I really love Ira Levin. Rosemary's Baby I read I think a couple of years ago now. One of my favorite horrors. I think I'll have to sit on it more. I think I do like Rosemary's Baby a little bit more than this one, but this one was it's definitely a horror classic for a reason. I would highly recommend, and I think it's crazy that even though I know of the Stepford Wives, I feel like that is kind of a phrase that gets thrown around a lot. I did not know like the extent of what actually happens, just kind of like the basic synopsis, and wow. I do think it's funny, this is an older copy, that the front dust jacket flap says that it is one of those rare novels whose very title may well become part of our vocabulary. For after reading it, you will never forget Stepford and the horror it contains, and there is a certain kind of woman who from now on will be known as a Stepford wife. And I think that is very accurate, and it's kind of funny that that's in the dust jacket because Stepford wife, I feel like, is a phrase that's used a lot. I feel like certain themes and tropes that were in here and that were explored in here are definitely used a lot, particularly in the horror genre still today. Very short, very effective horror. Just go into it knowing that a family moves to a small idyllic suburb named Stepford. Everyone is super friendly, super nice, super perfect families, and yet just a little too perfect. Something a little more sinister is going on, and the perfection might not be as natural as the people in this suburb would lead you to believe. That's really all you need to go into it knowing. Yeah, I really loved this one. I definitely think it's a horror classic I will continue to recommend. It's honestly just a classic I would continue to recommend. It was a very effective horror for me, and I just am really big fan of Ira Levin. So those are the two books that I have finished, which is crazy because those were not the two books that I was anticipating that I would finish first, even start first. I started Stepford Wives on a whim. I have actually started Petite, Mort by Olivie Blake, and this one is one where I thought that I would really race through it. Atlas 6, one of my favorite books of last year. I am on page 62 out of 200. I am enjoying my time with this one. I had put it down to pick up another book, and I'm going to get back into it tonight. This one definitely has like one of my favorite, I wouldn't call it a trope necessarily, but definitely one of my favorite things in like fantasy or even horror, where the main character is presented with information, presented with, in this case, the fact that vampires and witches and other supernatural creatures are real, and she has this very real evidence in front of her and she accepts it. I really do like that. I like when books don't spend a lot of time, like waste a lot of time with the main character refuting things that's in front of their faces. I totally get being skeptical and having like your whole world's view like changed before your eyes, but I'm gonna be honest, if I meet a flesh and blood vampire or I meet a flesh and blood witch or wizard and I see like them do their thing in front of me, I'm like not going to deny it. So I appreciate that, especially for such a small book, that we don't waste too much time trying to be like explain away the magical elements in this one. We are following, our main character's name is Marissa. Her grandmother dies, a very reclusive grandmother. She didn't really know her too well, but she inherits her grandmother's house. Her grandmother lives in New Orleans, and she goes and realizes that the house comes with some responsibilities that she was not prepared for, and meets a cast of dark otherworldly creatures like vampires and witches and werewolves, and realizes there's a whole separate world other than the one that she had always lived in, and realized that these creatures were living among us. So I am really enjoying it. It's definitely not gripping me in the way that the Atlas 6 did, but at the same time, I still am really enjoying it. I just feel like Olivie Blake does a really good mood piece as well. Like I feel like I am in location. It's very atmospheric. The characters are very, very angsty in a very fun way for a vampire book. So I am very excited to keep reading this one. It'll probably definitely be the next book that I pick up. I'm gonna be honest, I thought I was going to breeze through this and have this be the first book that I finished for this readathon, but just I had other reading plans. But definitely this one, I should finish it. I'm not gonna say tonight, but within the next couple of days for sure. Well, the readathon ends on Sunday, so I'm gonna finish it before Sunday for sure, but I am excited to finish this one. Olivie Blake, I don't wanna call her a favorite author yet because I've only read the one thing by her, but I am excited to read something else by her. Now, those are books that were on my TBR that I've talked about before this update. I did get a couple library books. Some of my holds came in, so I thought I'd briefly share because one of them I might pick up for this readathon. I'm not sure. That's going to be The Lost Girls by Sonia Hartl. And this one is, I feel like, heavily inspired from The Lost Boys, which is one of my favorite like Halloween spooky movies. I really enjoy it. But I think this one's kind of like The Lost Boys meets John Tucker Must Die. So that just sounds like a really fun premise. I just really enjoy vampire books. So it is a YA about a girl who gets turned in the 80s and she thinks she's found her forever true love. That ends up not happening. He dumps her. She is living out the rest of her years as an immortal teen. She realizes that she is not the only young woman that this vampire has turned and then broken up with and dumped. So she meets up with these other girls and they plot how to bring him down. So intrigued to pick this up again, maybe for winterween. It's pretty spooky. It's got vampires in it. So I am excited. It also is a little bit short as well, so could be a good readathon pick. And then the other one, definitely not a good readathon pick, but this is going to be the year that I read a Brandon Sanderson. I love fantasy, love fantasy. I've never read a Brandon Sanderson book before, and that's not to say I haven't tried. I have tried to read Elantris 3 different times now, and I just don't think that one's for me, or if it's going to be for me, I don't want it to be my first Brandon Sanderson book because I just was like not impressed. It's never gripped me. I tried twice with the audiobook. Once with the physical book. I think probably the physical book for that one would be the way that I would go, but I want to get sucked into one of his series before I go back to that one because I just was not meshing with it too well. So I got Mistborn and I'm very excited to try this one. I definitely want to read the Wave Kings series. I think that one honestly probably will be the series that I like the best, but it is a very large time investment and this is a completed trilogy. So I figured I would start with this one. I have heard really good things about Mistborn. This isn't called Mistborn. The series is called Mistborn. It's called The Final Empire. But this essentially, I think if I'm remembering correctly from everything I've heard about this on BookTube, it is essentially if the bad guy won the conflict and now they're several years into the rule of this horrible, horrible ruler, maybe? And so we're following what happens to the world after the chosen one is dead and the Bad Person has won, I believe. I think it's this one. Don't blast me if it's not. I am going to pick this up eventually. I think honestly, I'll probably pick it up in February. It's very intimidating that I haven't actually read a Brandon Sanderson, and he gets so much love from not just the booktube community, but from obviously just people who love reading in general. And every single time I feel like I have a conversation with someone about fantasy and they bring up Sanderson, and I have not read anything by him. So I would like to change that. So those were my library holds that I got the other day. So we might see one of them again in this vlog. And then last but not least, really fast, I did get a Barnes & Noble gift card for Christmas, and I contemplated a lot on how I was going to spend it, and ultimately I picked something. I did do a pre-order, but I also picked something that it wasn't a need. I actually own a copy of this series already, and it's one of my favorite series, so I already had a copy. So it definitely wasn't something that I would have ever bought for myself, probably with my own money, but definitely with a gift card, I felt like this would be something that I would gift to someone else, and I feel like in the spirit of a gift card being a gift to yourself, I wanted to pick out something like a little extravagant for me, and something that I normally wouldn't necessarily pick up because I try not to have multiple copies. I know my 2 Poppy War editions are staring at me right there, but I think that's really the only book that I have multiple copies of. I definitely try not to have multiple editions of my favorite books, even though I don't have a problem with people who do. I honestly just don't have a lot of space. But anyway, I got this bind up edition of the His Dark Materials series, and I just think this is the most beautiful cover I've ever seen. So this is like my favorite series of all time. And the copy that I have it's just 3 paperbacks, and I definitely feel like with the amount of times that I'm gonna want to reread this series over the course of my life, I think I'd like something just a little bit sturdier than the paperbacks that I have. And this cover I feel like is just so beautiful, and it's like not just a cover that is gorgeous, but I feel like it fits the tone of the series so well. And then the spine looks like just like a classic book spine. Absolutely love it. I kind of want to reread this series now that I got it. But yeah, so this is the His Dark Materials series, bind up of The Golden Compass, The Subtle Knife, and The Amber Spyglass, and I just love this book. I'm obsessed with it. It's definitely something that I had eyed for such a long time, but never bought it because I already owned copies of His Dark Materials. And while I do love owning books, definitely I was prioritizing just getting new ones rather than multiple copies of books that I already own. So I'm very excited that I gifted myself with this. I'm very excited to reread the series using this copy for the first time. I don't know, maybe sometime this year. I have to catch up on the series. I watched season 1. I did really enjoy it. I want to watch season 2 eventually. So maybe later on. This is definitely a wintry read, so I don't know, maybe January, maybe February. So I'm very excited to have this in my collection, but that is really all of the updates that I have for you all. I'm gonna go get reading, wrap up the week, and I will talk to you all later. So it is now Sunday. Winterween is almost over, and I just casually did not update to you all weekend. I did get some reading in, and I'm not sure where we left off with my last reading update, but I'm very cozy right now, very indicative of my entire weekend. This is like one of my favorite Christmas presents that I got. My partner got it for me. It's like a blanket, but it's also a hoodie. It is very excessive, but it is very comfortable. It's like the coziest thing ever, perfect for a reader. So yes, this is what I will be doing the update in today, because it is on the later side and I am just all cozied up, ready to end the weekend. It was a very casual weekend. If the hoodie is any indication, I got a lot of reading done and I just did not update you all on it at all. So I did finish La Petite Mort. I don't believe believe I've updated you on this one. So I enjoyed it. I had a lot of fun. It was very short, and I hate being that person being like, oh, I wish it was longer, because novellas are meant to be novellas. They're not exactly meant to be any longer. I really love a good atmospheric vampire story, and I love a good atmospheric queer vampire story as well. So this checked all those boxes. Absolutely wonderfully atmospheric writing, just like the Atlas 6. I had a lot of fun with it. I just wish it was longer. There was so much little details about the world that I felt like could be explored in other novellas. I feel like this could very easily be like a novella series with the characters that were introduced and just the world that was introduced. So I really enjoyed it. I don't think you need to know much about it other than the fact that it is just a very atmospheric vampire and witchy story set in New Orleans. It's very short, so if any of those are buzzwords for you, I would definitely pick it up. I had a lot of fun reading this, and I am using that one for the read a novella prompt, which means that I have 2 books left: read a book at night or in the dark, and read a book with a winter setting. Honestly, I did read all of that one at nighttime, so that would work for that. So I don't mind doubling up on prompts. I'm just trying to get 5 different books for 5 different prompts. So yeah, I am also reading another book that I've only been reading at night, and that is actually The Lost Girls by Sonia Hartl. I did talk about this one. The pitch is pretty much exactly as I would describe it from my last update. Very much the Lost Boys inspired story meets John Tucker Must Die. It's a YA, very different in tone. Both of these are queer vampire stories, but for definitely different audiences. This is adult, this is YA. This is definitely, it deals with some darker topics because vampires, I feel like that's kind of a given, but this definitely feels a lot more almost like sitcom-y, or like The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, how it's kind of campy but also kind of spooky. This would probably work really well in that. It's not a lot of scare factor or spook factor, but there are vampires in it. Tagline is "Getting over your vampire ex is as easy as killing him and stealing his new girlfriend." It's very fun, very cute. I do appreciate that this does kind of challenge some of the vampire tropes that I don't love in YA about immortal vampires dating teenagers. I like that this is challenging some of those and talking about how toxic some of those romance tropes can be. So it's very self-aware of the genre, making fun of it while also like contributing some new blood, as it were, like some new tropes. So I'm having fun with it. It's definitely just like a fun, fast-paced read. So yes, this one I think I can finish by then for sure. It is, I don't think it's over 300 pages. I think this one's just under 300 pages, so it shouldn't be too hard to finish. I'm already halfway through it. Hopefully Monstrous Volume 6 has a winter setting, because that's the only thing left on my TBR for winterween, and I can definitely finish that in a day. So hopefully there's a winter setting. If not, I'll switch around some of the prompts, because definitely Misery by Stephen King, and I think a little bit of the Stepford Wives too, had scenes that took place in the winter. Not all of those take place in the winter, but definitely some of them. So we might be reorganizing a little bit, but I think I should be able to hit every single prompt. That is it for this update. Just a very short rapid fire update. I did already film a lot today. I filmed my favorite books of 2021 video, which is just, I feel like the hardest video for me to film, like of any video all year, because for me at least, you first have to figure out the 10 books that you're going to include in it, and then figure out not only like brief synopses of them, because it's a lot of books to talk about, but also like why you enjoyed them, keeping it concise and informative, especially because some of those books I could gush about for a long time. So that's always like a very challenging video for me to film. So I've already filmed a lot today, so it's a short little update for y'all today, but I will update you all later. I am having a lot of fun with winterween, so I will talk to you all tomorrow. Hello. So it has been a little while since my last update. The winterween readathon has come and gone. I just have not gotten around to editing the vlog, and then when I was editing the vlog I realized I never actually came on and closed out the vlog, so it's been a little while. Winterween ended about 9-ish, 10-ish days ago, so I've been really busy and I just completely forgot to end out the vlog. So this is me doing that, wrapping up pretty nicely. I mentioned that it was Sunday and I thought the readathon went until Monday, so I really didn't end up getting too much more reading done in terms of the winterween readathon because it did end at midnight on Sunday. But quickly going through all the books that I read: Misery by Stephen King, had snow on the cover, partially set in the winter. And then I also read La Petite Mort by Olivie. This one was one that I read exclusively at night in the dark. This is also a novella. I really enjoyed this one a whole lot more than Misery. Very fun. Definitely a very short, character-driven read. If you love vampires, highly recommend. And then we have The Stepford Wives by Levin. I really ended up loving this one too. I think this one might have ended up being my favorite book of the readathon. It's hard to tell. These two were both very, very good, solid reads for me. This one I feel like just was more impactful in a spooky, scary way. So this one I read for the read a book that gives you thrills and chills. It also does take place, I believe, at least partially in the winter. It goes through, even though it's a small book, quite a span of time. I noticed that most of my books had like a little bit of time in the winter, not primarily in the winter, but that was really interesting. I also ended up reading The Lost Girls. This one didn't really go for any of the prompts, honestly, but it was a spooky good time. Definitely on, I would say, the younger side of YA. Very fast, very quippy vampire book, but very different than La Petite Mort by Olivie. The Lost Girls felt like very rom-com-y sort of YA. It's been pitched as like vampires meets John Tucker Must Die. I honestly didn't really get any of the Lost Boys out of it, but I'd say John Tucker Must Die. I feel like that's like a good kind of tone for if you're looking for that kind of tone plus vampires. That was a fun read, pretty fast as well. So all in all, I did have a really good reading week, and it's been a while, so that's why this last part is kind of speedy, but I think I've talked about all the books at length throughout this vlog. So definitely been a fast-paced couple of weeks. It's been crazy at work for me. I also kind of redecorated my reading room. I think there's some footage right before this clip of I had like fairy lights that were kind of hung up just with like tape. It was very much a very quick hack job at making ambiance in my reading room. And then for Christmas, I actually got LED lights. So me and my partner, I was just there for moral support, but he hung those up, and now my reading room is an absolutely wonderful place to hang out. It's just, the vibes are immaculate always. So I've really been enjoying that, but definitely a weird end to the reading vlog. But I hope you enjoyed it. I hope everyone, if they participated, had fun during winterween. I know I did. I really enjoyed kicking off the year with some great spooky reads, and a lot of these probably were not books that I would have necessarily prioritized in January, especially like The Stepford Wives. I didn't really have this on any sort of TBR or any sort of set TBR before this readathon, so it was really nice to get to read some of those books for this readathon. But that is going to be the end of this vlog. A little bit of a chaotic one, but if you enjoyed it, please give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to my channel. Stay safe, stay spooky, and I'll see y'all in the next one. Bye!